Hello and welcome back. Today we are looking at the UK's famous missing person cases part 2. There are currently over 5,000 long-term missing person cases active in the UK, and we will go over some of these in this video. You will also see some of your suggestions, so thank you for them. I will go over the case and the most recent updates. If something jogs your memory or you have any information on any of these cases, the contact details are in the description. But let's get into our first case. 1. Lee Boxell. Lee has been missing for 35 years. He was born in February 1973 and has a younger sister. He grew to have a love for football, supporting Sutton United, but like many boys and girls, football became a huge part of his life, supporting, watching and playing. He would attend football matches with his friend group on weekends, and on the weekdays he would attend school as most other kids did. His routine was nothing out of the ordinary. He had good grades, a good friend group, and his family said he was a very nice person, but maybe too trusting of people. Lee was never really in any trouble. He was responsible. Lee went missing on the 10th of September 1988. The day was a normal Saturday for the Boxell family. Lee's mother went out to visit family, his sister went to see a friend, and his father said that 15-year-old Lee woke up later than everyone else, and he told Lee his plans for the Saturday, which included some shopping. And Lee's father went on with his day. Lee's team, Sutton United, were playing away, and it was too much of a journey to go and watch them. It's believed instead that Lee left the home at around 10:30 and went to the high street in Sutton, where he met a friend. They hung around for a few hours, and at around 1 p.m. they said their goodbyes, and Lee mentioned a football match. His dad arrived home during this time, and it was no surprise that the house was empty. That was a usual thing on a busy Saturday, and Lee would normally arrive home at 5 to 5:30. Lee's mum rang at 5 and was told Lee wasn't home yet. At first this didn't worry her, but then she began to ring every hour, checking if he had arrived yet, because it was unlike Lee not to let them know of a change of plans. She arrived home and rang all family and friends. They also called the local hospitals and rang the police, who seemed to assume he was a young lad, maybe out just a bit late. But by the morning Lee still hadn't arrived home. They rang the police again and an officer came to their house. Lee's dad escorted the police officer and they looked around the high street and local area. They came back with nothing new. The police first thought one option was that Lee had run away, but within days they realised there was no reason for him to do this. They then tried to piece together where Lee had gone after seeing his friend and looked at CCTV of local football matches and asked for witnesses from the game to come forward with any information. No new information came forward and he was not spotted on CCTV. It was actually at this point that the police found out he was spotted outside Tesco's at around 2:20 and walked in the direction of his home, which meant he would never make it to a local football. At the time that was Croydon's home match. Lee was put on milk cartons and featured on Crime Watch, but the investigation led nowhere. Following this, they investigated any possible suspects or leads, but again, it was a dead end. It was years later, in 2011, that there was a real lead. William Lambert was a local gravedigger and sentenced to 11 years for SA on young girls. After this, people came forward talking of a youth club run at the church and how Lambert had made remarks that he had taken Lee's life. This club was unofficial and run by Lambert. An inmate also came forward and told police that Lambert had admitted to taking Lee's life. Following this, the police began to dig up the graveyard. Because of laws in place, they were unable to dig graves and only around. After this was completed, they had no evidence that Lee was there, although police believe he would have been placed with someone else. The police also began to investigate the unofficial youth club, nicknamed The Shed. 3 men were arrested and 1 woman, but all were released without charges. The police confirmed they were aware of The Shed after Lee's disappearance, but did not know it was run by an offender. It is said that The Shed was where lots of young people went as they were able to drink. The police now believe that Lee went to The Shed and witnessed the illegal goings-on, and because of this lost his life. Lambert told police he did not really know Lee and that he had come to The Shed on 1 occasion. He was held over taking Lee's life but was not charged. He is 85 years old. Lee's father, Peter, said, "I don't think Lee's alive. No, if Lee was alive he would have been seen." There is a £20,000 reward for anyone who can tell Crime Stoppers where Lee is or have any information that could lead to a conviction associated with the case. There are no further updates. 2. Suzy Lamplugh. Suzy Lamplugh has been missing for 38 years. She was 25 years old at the time of her disappearance from Fulham on the 28th of July 1986. Suzy was an estate agent and worked for a firm in Fulham. She had been working for them for just over a year. She had a good social life. She spent time with her boyfriend and her family and would frequent the Prince of Wales pub in Upper Richmond Road, Putney. She went to the pub on the Saturday evening. On Monday the 27th of July, she attended work and then just after lunch at 12:40 left to show a client a property, 37 Sherrolds Road in Fulham. In her work diary, she wrote 12:45 Mr. Kipper, 37 Sherrolds OS, meaning meet outside of the property. She left with her usual belongings, her keys and details of the property. She would drive there in her work car, a white Ford Fiesta. It had been a few hours and Suzy's colleagues became a bit concerned, but thought maybe she'd stopped off to see her parents and have some lunch. They went to the property at around 3:30 to check if she was still there. They returned to the office and at 5:50 they called the police to report her missing and called her mother. The police were called, as well as friends and family, and a search began. Witnesses came forward to the police. One from the owner of the house next door heard someone leaving number 37 and saw Suzy and a man leaving the house and looking back up at it. He was described as holding a champagne bottle with a ribbon on. Another witness said the two were arguing, but they were seen entering a car. The man was described as a white male between 25 and 30 with a dark complexion with dark hair which he had swept back. He was dressed very well in a nice suit. Her close friend Barbara Whitfield insisted she had seen Suzy driving north up the Fulham Palace Road in her car with a man at around 2:45 p.m. Many witnesses said they saw Suzy's white Ford Fiesta parked outside a garage opposite 123 Stevenage Road. When the police went to check there at 10 p.m, they found her car still there where the witnesses had said, opposite another house that was currently for sale. The driver's door was open, the handbrake was on, and the keys were missing, which led the police to think it was parked in a rush. The seat was pushed far back, which meant that Suzy would have been unable to drive the car, and her purse was found, but the keys to the property on 37 Sherrolds Road were not. There were witness statements that a dark-coloured BMW was seen there at the time Suzy's car was, and one witness said they saw a blonde-haired woman coming down the road in a BMW with a man. It looked like she was either screaming or laughing, and the BMW was being driven erratically. As well as the search, they also questioned those close to her, one of the first being Suzy's boyfriend. He had a solid alibi. Suzy also shared a flat with a friend who was a male. He too had a solid alibi. Her flat was searched and her place of work, but nothing suspicious was found. The police spoke to her work colleagues and they told police how a bouquet of roses was delivered to the office for her by an unknown man a few days before she disappeared. At this time, she was only considered a missing person, so the police did not look at local criminals, which really delayed the investigation massively. The main question was, who was Mr. Kipper? An artist sketched him and the police noted how he resembled criminal John Cannan, who was in a prison hostel near the area Suzy disappeared. He was on day release and had a job locally. He also frequented the same bars and pubs that Suzy did, the Prince of Wales being one of these. Inmates and workmates came forward and said that he had met a new uptown girlfriend named Suzy, and he confirmed himself he had visited the bars that Suzy did. He was in prison because he had argued and attacked his girlfriend, and then a year later robbed a shop. In October 1987, he went on to abduct and take the life of Shirley Banks. He attempted to argue two other women in a shop 3 weeks later after driving to the shop in his black BMW in Bristol. He was arrested and Shirley's Mini was found in his garage with a fake number plate. Met Police detectives travelled to Bristol to interview him about the Lamplugh disappearance. They hadn't mentioned that the fake number plate used on Shirley's car was SLP 386S. SLP maybe for Suzy Lamplugh, and 86 the year she disappeared. Without prompt, he told police he had chosen the letters for the plate at random. He claimed that he had bought the car from a Bristol businessman who was responsible for taking the lives of Shirley Banks, Suzy Lamplugh and another girl, and that the man was in a great deal of trouble. Two former ex-girlfriends of his came forward to the police in the 90s to say they believed he had been involved with the Suzy Lamplugh disappearance. Canaan was sentenced to life imprisonment for taking the life of Shirley and for several other R's abductions and attempted abductions. Leads led to dead ends, and by the late 90s, the Met Police re-examined the investigation, highlighting police failures, and this launched a new investigation with fresh eyes. In the original investigation, computers were not used and instead index cards, which were thoroughly examined by the new investigating team. From these indexes, they found that lots of estate agents had been visited by a man calling himself Mr. Kipper. In the 1970s and 1980s, there were various R's against estate agents in the West Midlands, where Canaan was living. 20 women were assaulted and R'd in properties in the area, and no one was ever arrested for the crimes, although the police believe it was him. The first missing person release was a photo of Suzy with brown hair, which was a major failure, as at the time she disappeared she had tinted her hair blonde. There were new reconstructions that were shown on Crime Watch in 2000. Suzy had worked at a desk near the window, in part because the office believed that positioning an attractive woman by the window would attract customers. Witnesses identified Canaan as looking through the office window and being the man they saw in Fulham the day Suzy disappeared. The new team looking through the indexes also found that Suzy had told relatives shortly before she disappeared that she had a new boyfriend from the Bristol area. The team also focused on witness sightings, especially that of the dark BMW, and came to realise that Canaan also owned a dark BMW. He had no memory of where he was at the times he was on day release when Suzy disappeared, despite in other interviews always having a very good memory and being able to recall times and places to the police. It's said that in prison his nickname was Mr. Kipper because he wore Kipper-style broad ties. In December 2000, he was arrested on suspicion of taking the life of Suzy and her abduction. He was interviewed at the Hammersmith police station. He didn't provide interviewers with any information that could eliminate him from the inquiry and didn't provide an alibi. In September 2001, he was arrested again and questioned at another London police station. It was the same thing. He provided no information that could eliminate him from the inquiry. They also looked at the Saturday night, where Suzy had spent her time in the Prince of Wales pub. While she was there, the contents of her handbag went missing, and after she had left, they were found by the landlord of the pub. The landlord telephoned Suzy to inform her, and she arranged to collect her belongings at 6 p.m. on Monday the 28th of July, the day that she disappeared. Several hours after Suzy vanished, a woman identifying herself as Sarah phoned the pub saying that she had a message for Suzy and she had left her number. A man then phoned the pub claiming to be a policeman and asking if the pub had Suzy's diary and checkbook. The police later confirmed the man was not a policeman and it was not known who Sarah was. The landlord of the pub said that they gave the paper to the police, which he had written the phone number on, although this piece of paper was lost. The new detectives team believed that Canaan could have been responsible for taking the contents of her handbag in the pub and stated the events were a clear indicator of stalking. Canaan was questioned about her disappearance in 1989 and arrested again in 2000, which was previously mentioned. But in 2002, the Crown Prosecution Service decided there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. He is the only prime suspect in the case. He is 70 years old and remains in prison. Other suggestions have included that Mr. Kipper was just something she wrote down in order to meet a man outside the office and she wasn't actually showing a house. There was a link to Steve Wright as they worked on the same cruise ship, but this was also dismissed. Unfortunately, Suzy has never been found and the case still remains open. Now we move on to case 3, Gloria Bielby. Gloria was 36 years old when she went missing in February 1979 from Bilton. She had a husband, Bernard, who was a well-known local butcher, and an 11-year-old son. By all accounts, she was a doting mother. She had a job as a secretary, and before she settled down, she was a glamour model. She competed in beauty pageants and once held the title of Miss Bridlington, but there was another side of her life, and she loved to party. It was reported she was seen in clubs, at weekends, and had various lovers. By 1979, her marriage had completely fallen apart. They slept in separate bedrooms for years and remained together purely for their son. It became apparent just a few years before Gloria disappeared, she was given £3,500 to buy a new car as part of a separation settlement. She was due to go on holiday with her boyfriend Mike Blackburn just after she disappeared. It was reported that outside of her husband and boyfriend, she also had brief flings, some saying she had the nickname Gloria Good Time Girl. Looking at the reports at around the time of her disappearance, it does come across as victim blaming, and not much is said about her husband's love life, but what her so-called lifestyle showed police was many suspects or scenarios. The day Gloria disappeared, she was seen getting into a red Ford Escort with an unknown man outside of her home in Bilton. This last sighting was told by a neighbour. She saw her around 11:30 a.m. and she was put in a suitcase in the boot of her car, which was being driven by a well-dressed, middle-aged man. The description of the man was well-dressed and Mediterranean. This description actually matched a man who delivered newspapers for the local shop and would work for Gloria's husband on different occasions, but the police were never able to establish who the gentleman was. Gloria was not reported missing until 3 months later. Her husband claimed he did not feel that there was any need to report his wife as a missing person, owing this to the nature of her character and lifestyle. Bernard has been interviewed various times since she disappeared. The police checked the premises and his butcher shop, where they checked the mincing machines, but nothing of interest was found. It was obvious that Bernard would be a suspect because of the state of their marriage, but police never found any solid evidence, although the local people assumed he was, and he had his butcher shop spray painted. Bernard believed his wife was still alive, and he offered a £500 reward for information on her whereabouts. Even though there was a suitcase, police believe if Gloria was to run away, she would have kept contact with her son. There was no reason for her to run. She had planned a holiday with her boyfriend. Following her disappearance, members of the public contacted the police saying they had seen Gloria in Holland and Mallorca, but this led to no new leads. Her friends also told police that in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she had told them she was afraid to be alone after receiving nuisance telephone calls. A fresh appeal was launched in August 1980 with a number of newspapers reporting on her case, but this led nowhere. In 2013, police reopened the investigation into her disappearance under a cold case review. Detectives believe that she may have had her life taken, but they were keeping an open mind. At the time, the Detective Chief Inspector, Matt Hutchinson, said, "This is a review of a long-term missing person. We are exploring the possibility she came to some harm. She may well have had an accident or taken her own life. We need to review all of the case papers and explore all the possibilities. We will be concentrating on the last time she was seen and what the inquiry found after that." Even after this investigation, there was no movement in the case, the police stating, "This is an extensive investigation during which many lines of inquiry were exhausted. Long-term missing people, unsolved cases are never closed. However, they often remain inactive for periods of time. We are keen to hear from anyone who may have any information in connection with missing Gloria to come forward." She has never made contact with anyone ever again, and in 2019 she was declared dead. There has been no other breakthrough in the case. The police believe she probably had her life taken, but why did she have a suitcase? The man's car she entered has never been identified. Unfortunately, we are just left with more questions. Now we move on to Case 4, Russell Bohling. Russell went missing when he was 18 years old from East Yorkshire on the 2nd of March 2010. It was a normal day. Russell was studying Brick Lane at college and set off from home at West Ella to attend Bishop Burton College in Beverley, but it actually isn't known if he ever attended college. It's been established that Russell had logged on to an RAF Bempton website at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. He also looked at another location, Ravenscar. Just to note, both these spots are known to be where people take their lives. His father indicated to the police that his son had been interested in satanic artwork that had been left on the closed bunker walls by a cult in the 1970s. Russell kept this information and the drawings on a USB stick. The police looked at USB sticks and computers at his home and in college, but this USB was never found. On the day, he had left home and returned without informing anyone of where he had been or what he had done. Investigations later established that he had visited York, Bradford and Bridlington, but there was no indication of why, who he went there to see, or what he did there. His parents noted how he was dressed smarter than usual. He was reported missing the same evening. His Renault Clio was found 45 miles away at Bempton Cliffs a day later. This was near to the former Royal Air Force bunker at Bempton on the East Yorkshire coast. His car was noted by an RSPB worker at 5 p.m. on the 2nd of March and was still there when the worker returned the next morning. It had a ticket on it purchasing a full day's parking, and this was bought at 11:30 a.m. The police, fire and rescue went to search around the area where his car was found. In the first searches of the area, the former RAF bunker was checked for a living human. This was criticised by the family later on. In the searches, they used heat-sensitive cameras and torches, which wouldn't be effective if Russell had come to some harm. The searches gave no clues. In December 2012, the firefighters went back to search the bunker as part of a training exercise. Russell's family were present at the briefing and stayed there for the full 3 hours. The search cost the family $1,200 for the bunker's concrete to be opened up, as it had been sealed because of illegal use. Searches were also undertaken on land around the bunker and Bempton Cliffs. The Coast Guard also helped by searching at sea and from air. Searches were also carried out by the family's holiday home at Ravenscar in North Yorkshire. 2 years after Russell's disappearance, his family found his best pair of training shoes at the holiday home, which they are convinced he was wearing on the day he disappeared. Unfortunately, these searches came up with nothing. Russell's family strongly believe a third party was involved in the disappearance. They say that his car only had 3.8 litres of fuel in it, so it would be impossible to reach the Bempton area without refuelling. His card has not been used and he had very little cash on him, which leads them to believe that someone else was with him when he drove to Bempton. The family also said that a $300,000 payment that his father was set to give him so he could start up a business may also be a factor in his disappearance. The police believe that Russell took his own life, as they found a recording of him talking about taking his own life. The family said that the tape was 3 years old and was recorded when he was just 15 and anxious about all his exams. The family went to court regarding the lackluster searches by the police and other emergency services. The case was thrown out when the recorder presiding over the case said that it was not up to the courts to determine whether or not an investigation had been handled well. There were no new leads in the case, but in 2010 he was featured on Crime Watch on the BBC. A twist in this case is that Russell's father gave the police a computer to search through in hope that it might lead to something new. He was actually then convicted of possessing CP. There was an inquest and Assistant Coroner David Rosenberg ruled out that Russell took his own life and gave his own narrative verdict at the inquest. He said he thought Russell passed away on the day he went missing, and based on the submissions of the police that he has never been found, I believe somehow he passed away in the sea at Bempton Cliffs. We do not know how Russell came to pass away. There was not enough evidence to show whether he might have tripped and fallen, or suffered an asthma attack after going into an RAF bunker. There have been no further updates to Russell's disappearance. Case 5. Ruth Wilson. Ruth went missing when she was 16 years old on the 27th of November 1995 from Surrey. Ruth had one sister and unfortunately her mother took her own life when she was 3 years old. She was brought up by her father and stepmother. Ruth was described as intelligent and quirky. She played piano and guitar and had a Saturday job in a music shop, as well as a very close group of friends. At 16, Ruth was in college studying science. She attended her local church and her father was a teacher as well as a parish counsellor. Ruth was always told that her mother had passed away from an accident, but Ruth didn't believe this, and a month before she disappeared, she travelled to London to retrieve her mother's death certificate. Her friend said she also ran away from home around a month before she disappeared and stayed at his house. A close friend of Ruth's, Catherine, was moving and recalled Ruth wanting to go with her and her family. Catherine also remarked how Ruth did not want to go home after she had sleepovers at her house, but implications of this are denied by Ruth's family and other friends, stating it was not an unhappy home. The weekend before she disappeared, she went to work in the music shop as usual. Afterwards, she went for food with her ex-boyfriend and a friend at an Indian restaurant. She paid the bill and told them it would be something to remember her by. On the Sunday, she went to church and went to her ex-boyfriend's house for supper. On the Monday, she disappeared. Her dad and stepmom left for work early. Ruth and her sister would catch the bus to school. Her father recalls being irritated by Ruth and rushing past her saying, "I said something like, 'Out of my way, I'm in a hurry.' I'll always regret those were the last words I ever said to her. Before they were going to catch the bus, Ruth told her sister she wasn't going to go, which wasn't really too unusual as Ruth was in sixth form and her timetable did differ. Her sister said, "I thought it was a bit strange that she left it to the last minute to tell me, but that was all." Her ex-boyfriend, Will, drove to Ruth's house to give her a lift, but she declined and said she would see him later, but she never arrived at school. At around 11:30 a.m, she took a taxi into Dorking, and at midday she ordered flowers for her stepmother. She asked that they should be delivered the following Wednesday. Ruth then spent the afternoon in Dorking Library, and around 4 to 4:15 p.m, she took a taxi from Dorking railway station to the local beauty spot, Boxell. After a 10 to 15 minute journey in the taxi to the top of the hill, she was dropped off on a bridleway a short distance from a pub called Hand in Hand. When she was dropped off by the taxi driver, she just stood in the rain. He was the last person to ever see her, and this was around 4:30. The same evening, her parents rang the police and she was listed as a missing person. The taxi driver came forward and they searched the area she was dropped off. They used sniffer dogs, helicopters. There was a large group of police and volunteers. They used heat-seeking equipment. But unfortunately, nothing was found. The flowers she had ordered for her stepmother arrived 2 days into the searches. She left no note on them. Some people think of this as a nice gesture, but Catherine, Ruth's friend, saw this as a finger up. On the 1st of December, the police found notes in a bush at the top of Box Hill. It has never been released what the notes said. The handwriting was confirmed to be Ruth's. They also found alcohol and tablets, but no sign of Ruth. If the police did an extensive search of the area, how were these not found until 2 days is the first question that came into my mind. Were they left after she disappeared? There were more searches, but there were no further clues as to what happened to Ruth. The police could not establish any lead. They didn't know whether she took her own life, had an accident, or met someone there, or maybe she chose to run away. Catherine, Ruth's friend, who I previously mentioned, said that Ruth had an unhappy home life and complained about it, but had never been to Ruth's house. Her statements could not be verified. Sergeant Shane Craven, who is the head of the East Surrey's Police Missing Persons team, made an appeal on the 10th anniversary in 2005. He said, "In the weeks following Ruth's disappearance, there were some fairly reliable sightings of her in the Dorking area by people who knew her well. Sightings have been reported as far afield as Canada. The Wilsons also said of reports that Ruth had an unhappy family life. Her family do not recognise this view of Ruth's childhood. Ruth always knew about her biological mother's death, but not the exact cause. Sadly, we now know that before her disappearance, Ruth had discovered the tragic circumstances of her mother's death, but equally, sadly, she chose not to discuss or question this with any family members. There have been no further updates, and Ruth's case still remains open." Case 6. Patrick Warren and David Spencer. The two school friends went missing 27 years ago on Boxing Day 1996 from Solihull. Patrick was 11 years old and David was 13. David had a troubled time at school, and at the time he disappeared he was actually expelled. He had also been in youth court previously. There were talks of his upbringing around the time, and honestly through researching this case I only found out about it within the last year, which shows you how little press the case really got. Considering 2 young boys have gone missing, of course it was reported on locally, but you would think this would be nationwide news, and it wasn't. A lot of people, and it came across my mind too, have questioned whether it was because these 2 young boys were from working class families. At the time they disappeared, it was only around 6 months later, a young girl called Nicola Dixon was found odd and had her life taken just 8 miles away between 1996 and 1997. The news was dominated by her case, but again, it still begs the question, why were these boys not heavily reported on either? But let's get into the case. The 2 boys were the best of friends, and they lived in Chelmsley Wood. And on Boxing Day evening, they decided to go play outside. Patrick wanted to go on his new bicycle he had just got for Christmas. The boys had been spotted earlier by a police officer in the afternoon, playing with another group of children in a park, where they had been warned by the officer not to play on the frozen pond. They went home and told their parents they were going to visit Patrick's brother that evening. At midnight, they went to a 24-hour Shell garage and purchased a pack of biscuits. The attendant is the last person to ever see them. She said they walked towards the shopping centre. Patrick's bike was actually found near bins at the petrol station. It was found abandoned, although police didn't realise it was actually his bike until several weeks later. One of Patrick's other brothers found out that the boys hadn't returned, so he went looking for them the next day. After the search, he couldn't find them, so he reported them missing to the police. The police treated the case as runaways. They thought that they would show up a few days later, but they didn't. As I said before, the case was reported locally, but not nationally. Thankfully, in the years after they disappeared, they were featured on Crime Watch. There were no new leads each time they were featured. It was not until the case was reviewed in 2006 that the police named a prime suspect, Brian Lunn Field. Once the police named him, it was found out that the police had been investigating him with a disappearance since he was convicted in 2001 for abducting, R-ing and taking the life of Roy Tuthill in Surrey in 1968. Roy was 14 years old. Field had a long criminal history and had received 6 previous convictions for offences against boys, including a 1986 conviction for abducting 2 boys that were aged 13 and 16 in his car with the intent of R-ing them. They were also investigating him in regards to another case of another boy whose life was taken in 1984 in the same area the boys disappeared. The 2 boys were close to where Field lived. He was local, he was a gardener and also went to the local pubs. Some of those pubs were close to the boys' home. The police interviewed him in 2006 and he denied any involvement, and there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Field committed his crimes under the influence, and on the night the 2 boys went missing, it said he was driving around the area after drinking in his van. They also said that they had information that the boys were talking to him in the days before they disappeared. Detectives believe that Field is the culprit. Field passed away in prison in February 2024. The families of the 2 boys still conduct searches to find them, but unfortunately there are no signs of the boys or what happened to them. 7. Owen Harding. Owen was 16 years old when he went missing on the 26th of March 2020 from Saltdean. According to his mother Stella, Harding was a valued member of the local community. From his school teachers and college friends to the people he played football with, Harding was respected by those who knew him. At around 6 p.m, Owen had an argument with his mother. Owen was struggling in lockdown with not being able to see his girlfriend who lived in Yorkshire. Owen left the family home that evening, heading to Telscombe where he intended to watch the sunset. However, he never returned home, and everybody who knew him has never received any form of contact from him again. Stella reported Owen missing, and 2 witnesses came forward with information that they saw a boy who matched Owen's description at roughly 6:15 and 6:30 p.m. walking beside a road. A picture taken from CCTV placed Owen in Bannings Vale at roughly 6:50 p.m. The police also searched the cliffs in Saltdean and the surrounding area. The police released CCTV footage which showed 2 people whom officers urged to come forward, as they believed it was possible that they may have witnessed something that day which could help them with their inquiries. The footage also revealed that Owen was walking directly towards a path along the side of the cliffs. Owen's girlfriend also confirmed she was speaking to him on the phone at the time he was heading towards the cliffs. Owen was unable to be reached on his phone from around 6:23 p.m. Stella, Owen's mother, has not ruled out the possibility of a tragic accident. Simon Boxell, who is an oceanographer, has estimated that due to the weather conditions on that day and the fact that the tide was low, it was likely he would have been carried out to sea. Stella said she believes that if it was not for the first lockdown back in 2020, her son would probably still be here today. Unfortunately, there is no new information. Case 8. Luke Durbin. Luke was 19 years old when he went missing from Ipswich on the 12th of May 2006. He lived with his sister and mum in Suffolk. He was doing a music technology course at college in Essex, but dropped out after a year because of a long commute. He worked various jobs, but then acquired a steady job at Greengrocers a month or so before he disappeared. Early on, his family said they had a great relationship, and he was a caring person. He would not choose to disappear. Luke had a close friend called Alex. He was a chef and worked in London, but came back home, so Luke and friends planned to go out that night. Luke took time off work as well as his friend Zach, and 3 guys went out for the weekend. Luke rode his new motorbike to Alex's place in Woodbridge, planning to spend the night. At Alex's home, he left his motorbike as well as his wallet, keys, phone, and a change of clothes. The 3 had some drinks at a local pub. Then Luke, Alex and Zach took a taxi from Woodbridge to Ipswich to go clubbing at Zest nightclub. Alex took a taxi back shortly after they arrived because he had too much to drink. Luke and Zach lost contact of each other in the club. Luke was reported at Ipswich train station, a 5-minute walk from the nightclub, at around 2 to 3 a.m. After being told no trains were running, Luke is next spotted on CCTV at around 3:45 a.m, heading towards Hawk Express cabs. He had left his wallet at Alex's house. The receptionist suggested that he phoned his mum for her bank details, but he refused, stating he didn't wish to wake her up. Luke is then spotted on CCTV walking across the zebra crossing on the Dog's Head Street, heading towards the bus station at around 4 a.m. This is the last positive sighting of Luke. Shortly after this sighting, a silver or white Volvo 440 is caught on CCTV with registration plate M206LYE. This was later discovered to be false plates. The next day, Luke's family assumed he had gone to work, although after contacting friends and his work over his whereabouts, he was reported missing to the police by his mother. The police went through all CCTV and wanted information on the Volvo, but unfortunately, there were no leads. The nightclub that Luke attended, Zest, had a shooting in December of 2006, and it had its licence taken away and was immediately closed. Council members cited the club's reputation for attracting violent criminals and failing to ensure a safe environment as grounds for its closure. It's speculated that Luke owed money to dealers within his network. According to investigators, after Luke's shift concluded at the greengrocer, he went on to finalise a deal in Woodbridge before meeting up with Alex and Zach. Police confirmed that 3 different people had seen Luke in Woodbridge on May 13th, the day after he was last seen. All of them knew Luke and confirmed they had seen him in a car with 2 men. Luke's mum has voiced her criticisms towards the initial police investigation, stating it wasn't taken seriously enough, leading to grave mistakes, and missing a crucial window in declaring it a murder investigation. There has been no further information on Luke's disappearance. Case 9. Trevaline Evans. Trevaline was 52 years old when she vanished from Llangollen in Wales on the 16th of June 1990. As a side note, I'm so sorry to any Welsh that watch this video if I have just butchered that town, but I will put it up on screen. Trevaline had a husband, Richard, and a son. She was in the antiques world, and just over a year before she vanished, she opened up her own antique shop. It was in the town centre, and she bought from locals and further afield. On the week she disappeared, her and her husband Richard had been at their holiday home. She came back midweek and her husband stayed there. The day she disappeared was a normal day. She opened her shop at the usual time of 9:30 a.m. She used her car to get to her shop as usual and park a couple hundred yards away. Her shop was called Attic Antiques. Saturdays are usually one of the busiest days of the week for retail. Between 20 and 30 friends and family members, as well as customers, had popped into the shop and chatted with her. She also made plans for that evening to meet a friend. At 12:30, she was chatting to her friend, and 10 minutes later she put a notice on the door saying back in 2 minutes, as she usually would when she went on her lunch break. She was seen by multiple witnesses buying an apple and banana at 1 p.m. on the high street before crossing to nearby Castle Street. The last confirmed sighting of her was at 2:30 p.m. that afternoon by someone who knew her very well. She was walking near her home on Market Street. She was never seen again. Her shop remained closed the whole day, and this triggered her family to search at 11 p.m. The same night, her husband rang the police and reported her missing. The police searched the local area, including canals and rivers. They then started interviewing every household. 330 statements were taken, over 1,500 interviews were conducted, and almost 700 cars were eliminated from the inquiry. One lead the police did follow up was that she was seen with a well-dressed man with a black briefcase in the days before her disappearance. A sketch was drawn up of the man, but by 2000 it was seen as not accurate. Unfortunately, the police came to a standstill in the years following her disappearance. She was declared legally dead in 1997, and in 2001 the case was reopened. The police hoped using more updated technology may lead them to where she was. They first looked at her marriage to Richard. There were talks around the town that the marriage to Richard was not all as it seems, and one source said that they saw him in the town around 2:30 p.m. This couldn't be confirmed, as other witnesses said that he was definitely around the area of their holiday home. Richard was arrested but released without charges. He passed away in 2014. There was no movement in the case until 2019, and suddenly there was a change. Brothers Andrew and Lee Sutton heard information regarding her disappearance and contacted the police. They said that they had acquired information suggesting to them that she had her life taken and was beneath a golf club. That golf club was near her holiday home. They had then requested permission from the club to conduct an underfloor inspection on the 14th of March and claimed that their special camera revealed the presence of skeletal human remains, including a skull. They further claimed that the images were verified by a forensic expert. The police began the search, but unfortunately they found nothing. The brothers, however, remained insistent that their images showed something was present, going so far as to file a formal complaint about the police's handling of the matter. They maintain that it was removed in the intervening 5 days between their investigation and the start of the police investigation. They also state that they had received threatening phone calls. There was movement in the case again in 2021. There are lots of benches along a walkway close to where the couple's holiday home was, and a plaque appeared on a bench. The inscription said, "In memory of Trevaline Evans, vanished on the 16th of the 6th, 1990, found on the 14th of the 3rd, 2019. It was removed." But in 2020, another bench had another inscription. Justice awaits those responsible for the removal and disposal of Trevaline Evans in this life or the next from the golf club on the 19th of the 3rd, 2019 at noon, and may the Lord have mercy upon their souls. The brothers have said they had no involvement in either of the plaques. Unfortunately, Trevaline is still missing and there have been no further leads. 10. Ames Glover. Ames was just 5 months old when he went missing from Southall on the 5th of February 1990. On the day he went missing, his father, Paul, left Ames in the car as he went to a cash point, then a takeaway. He told police that he left him for about 20 minutes, and when he returned, he was gone. It was reported the car did not look like it was broken into. There were no witnesses who came forward who said they even saw Ames in the car. The police interviewed over 2,000 people, the immediate family and friends and those in the area, but it led the police to nowhere. The way the police handled this case has been highly criticised. They passed information on to the media that Ames' parents were not together at the time, and Ames was on the at-risk register, which added to the low media reports on Ames being reported missing compared to other missing children cases. His father, Paul, was arrested but released without charge and has always strongly denied that he had any involvement in his son's disappearance. In 2002, the case was reopened, but this led the police to nowhere. As of this year, the case still remains open, with Ames' mother saying, "Although I have tried to move on, there will always be a part of me that cannot. I need to know what happened to Ames." Case 11. Alex Sloley. Alex was 16 years old when he went missing from Islington, London on the 2nd of August 2008. He studied at the Islington Arts and Media School in North London and was attending City and Islington College. He was said to be brilliant at maths and loved football. He disappeared just 2 days before his 17th birthday. On the day he disappeared, he had been staying at a friend's house in Edmonton, North London. He left there around noon on the 2nd of August 2008 to return home for his birthday, but he never arrived. While at his friend's, he had hardly any money, no passport and no change of clothes. He, however, did have his phone, but the connection stopped when he vanished. The police looked through CCTV and found nothing to suggest where Alex went. They said it's like he disappeared off the face of the planet. There were a few possible sightings of him, but they were never confirmed, and in 2009 he was featured on nearly 13.5 million milk cartons. In July 2015, his mother, Narissa, was surprised to learn that the police had received numerous reports of sightings in 2009. She stated that she had met with police a number of times and they had never told her about this. Mick Neville, who was a retired head of the Met Police Central Images Unit, drew comparisons between Alex's disappearance and that of another student who was very good at maths, Andrew Goston, who was 14 when he disappeared less than a year before Alex. Andrew's last known location was King's Cross Station, and when Alex disappeared, he was thought to have been on his way to Islington, which is 2 miles from King's Cross Station. He said it raises the question on whether there is someone on the prowl. The potential links between these cases need to be recognised. In 2019, the Met Police released an updated e-fit. It was reported that there had been no use of Alex's national insurance, bank account or passport in the years since he has been missing. Detective Constable Tom Boom of the Missing Persons Unit stated that there was no evidence of harm, but the case had gone cold and there were no major leads. Like in Andrew's case, there was lots of talk about a ring operating in the surrounding area of King's Cross Station. But, as of what we know, this hasn't been investigated by the police. The family believe there were major mistakes made by the police. One failure was a police officer turned up at Narissa's home, Alex's mum, in 2009 to arrest him when she had reported him missing 6 months previously. Unfortunately, there has been no further updates. Case number 12, Jordan Ratcliffe. Jordan was 16 years old when he went missing from the Northern Quarter in Manchester city centre on the 31st of August 2008. It's said that Jordan was very well liked and very well known. He grew up in Moston, in Manchester, and supported Manchester United. Jordan was brought up by his auntie Kimberly from the age of 20 months old. When his grandfather was taken ill, he agreed to spend some time at a hostel away from the home. On the 31st of August 2008 at 4:45 p.m, Jordan was dropped off by his aunt outside the hostel on Tibb Street in the Northern Quarter. Kimberly told Jordan to call her once he was all settled, but he never did. This is the last confirmed sighting of Jordan. Jordan was supposed to visit the Men's Direct hostel in Longsight, which was a homeless shelter, but he never actually arrived. Jordan was believed to be carrying a backpack containing a packet of crisps and £5. At the time he disappeared, Jordan was wearing black trainers, black Nike tracksuit bottoms and a grey and black jacket. Jordan's family had not immediately expected to hear from him, and they didn't report him missing until the 8th of September 2008. The police have offered a £20,000 reward and investigated any lead they could. There weren't many, but it led them to nowhere. In 2010, the British Transport Police stopped a young man matching Jordan's appearance on the Waterloo who told the officer that he was from Manchester. This was investigated and led to nothing, as well as another lead that he was spotted in Portsmouth, and again this led nowhere. In 2017, the case was passed on to the Greater Manchester Police's murder squad. The Ashton Canal was drained as part of the search for Jordan, but he wasn't found. There has been no new leads or no new information in the case. Case 13, Shaun Ritchie. Shaun went missing on the 31st of October 2014 at the age of 20 from Fraserburgh. On the day he disappeared, he had travelled with 7 other friends for a party in a remote farmhouse. It was Halloween. That night, he was last seen running from a farmhouse near a woodland area. Outside later that same night, 2 phone calls were made from the Greenburn area to the police. One call asking for police to come to a farm for help, and a second call cancelling the request. A huge search commenced, including ground-penetrating radars, divers, dogs, and 5 days later, some of Shaun's clothing was found, a belt, trainers, and a hooded top. But until this day, no Shaun. The police did some searches and followed any lead they could, but it led nowhere. Shaun's father, Charlie, has been very critical of how the police handled the investigation. He said that he believes that his son Shaun had his life taken over a debt. Charlie is offering a £5,000 reward for anyone who can help him find his son, and Shaun's mother, Carol Ann, as well as Shaun's sister, Nicole, believe that Shaun had his life taken. Shaun's disappearance remains a missing persons inquiry, and Police Scotland have stated there is no evidence to suggest that Shaun has been the victim of any crime. There have been no new leads. Case 14, Robert Hutchinson. Robert went missing on the 23rd of June 2014 from Sunderland at the age of 56. He was last seen leaving his home on Corporation Road in the Hendon area at around 6:20 p.m. He left in his blue Nissan Micra but has never been seen since. His vehicle was later found parked up at the end of Stewart Street, close to the Chester Road, which is not far from Sunderland city centre, on July 3rd. His family reported him missing 3 days later, and the police treated the case as a murder inquiry, citing they think he came to some harm. 2 men aged 39 and 55 were arrested and bailed. Crime Stoppers UK offered a reward of £3,000 for information that might help the investigation. In 2017, a reward of £10,000 was offered by Crime Stoppers, again for information. Nobody has been charged in relation to his disappearance. In 2019, police released CCTV footage of people on Chester Road around the time of his disappearance. By then, 3 men had been arrested, but none charged. In 2020, his daughter, Paula Hutchinson, issued an appeal for anyone from information about her father to get in touch. She said it was very much out of character for him not to be in contact with his family for such a long time, as he loved them so much. Unfortunately, there is no new information. Case 15, Martin Allen. Martin went missing from London on the 5th of November 1979 at the age of 15. Martin's family started off in a council flat in North London, but his dad got a major new job as the chauffeur to the Australian High Commissioner, and the whole family moved to a cottage in the grounds of the Australian High Commission, which was in Kensington. They lived near the likes of Margaret Thatcher, who had actually met Martin's dad on a few occasions. He was good at school and described as shy and not the type to run away. On the 5th of November 1979, Martin travelled home from school on the London Underground. His intention was to go see his older brother, Bob, who lived near in Holloway Road, but he needed to go home first in order to get some money. At around 3:50 p.m, he said goodbye to some school friends at King's Cross Station and set off in the direction of the Piccadilly line platform to travel home. This was the last confirmed sighting of Martin. Martin failed to reach his brother Bob's home. The family were not alarmed that he didn't return home that night, as they assumed he was staying with his older brother. After having spent the following day not hearing any word from Martin, his mother rang Bob at 7 p.m. He had thought Martin had gone home due to fireworks from firework night celebrations. The parents phoned Martin's best friend, Robert, who told them Martin hadn't even been at school. The parents then called the Met Police. The Met Police launched a large operation. It was supported by a huge media campaign, but this failed to locate where Martin was. The police searched Martin's bedroom in the family cottage for 9 hours, but didn't find any fingerprints. After a TV appeal 5 weeks after Martin's disappearance, a witness came forward to report seeing a man with a boy acting suspiciously at Gloucester Road station at 4:15 p.m, about half an hour after Martin vanished. The witness reported that the man was standing with his arms around the shoulder of the boy, who resembled Martin. The boy appeared distressed, and both parties appeared to be nervous as they got onto the train. The witness saw the man prod the boy in the back and overheard him telling the boy not to try and run when the pair left the train station at Earl's Court Station. The witness described the man as 6 foot tall, in his 30s, well built, with very blonde hair and a moustache, wearing a denim jacket and trousers. At the time, it became London's biggest house-to-house inquiry. They also got an artist to create an identikit and circulated it across the media. Investigators eliminated 200 possible suspects, spoke to 50,000 people and collected 600 statements during the investigation, but unfortunately the identity of the man was never discovered. Martin's brother, Geoffrey, said that in the early stages of the police investigation, the detective that was in charge had told the family there were high-up people involved in his disappearance and that they should stop talking and not take it further because someone will get hurt. In 1998, there was a surge in interest in the case, as it was reported that police in Liverpool acted off a tip and had discovered a shrine dedicated to Martin at the home of an offender. But no new leads were forthcoming. In 2009, the police told the brothers of Martin that the files on his disappearance had been destroyed in a flood, and in the same year, Martin's parents said they had no hope of seeing him alive again. They believed that he had been abducted. They stated their wish simply to know what had happened and why. There was new information which led to the case being reopened in 2009. The officer leading the investigation admitted that the police were completely baffled by the case and that despite a massive initial inquiry and a good response from the public, they had very few leads. Police interviewed imprisoned Dennis Nielsen twice about Martin's disappearance. There was no evidence of a connection that was found. In 2012, police initiated a number of new investigations into a scandal of allegations against children dating back over the previous 30 years. This included the infamous allegations that a ring was run at the Elm Guest House during the 1970s and 1980s. Nothing came from this investigation relating to Martin's disappearance, but in April 2015 it was announced by the police that some of the lost evidence had been rediscovered. In May 2016, Operation Midland was formed to reinvestigate Martin's case. Police also questioned Sidney Cook, who was a gang leader of a ring and was jailed for life in 1985, but as of today there have been no new leads or charges. Case 16, Kevin Palmer. Kevin went missing on the 12th of March 1999 at the age of 37 from Curdridge in Hampshire. Kevin worked as a timeshare salesman and lived in Malaga with his wife and daughter. He travelled to the UK and was supposed to be visiting Newcastle, but instead visited Titchfield in Hampshire. He spent the evening of the 12th of March at a hotel and country club with at least 4 other people. He then got in a taxi with 2 men and a woman. An argument broke out between Kevin and the 2 men. The 3 left the taxi. However, the 2 men returned to the taxi and drove off. Kevin was never seen again. His suitcase was never recovered, nor was the taxi driver ever identified. The 2 men claimed that they fought with Kevin and left him lying on the ground of an industrial estate, still alive. In 2003, Hampshire police stated that they were treating Kevin's disappearance as suspicious. The men were arrested and their homes were searched for clues, although they were never charged due to insufficient evidence. At the time, one of the men was serving a 12-year sentence for smuggling. Another man was interviewed in Spain, but this led to nothing. A 2009 inquest into Kevin's disappearance resulted in an open verdict, since the coroner felt there was not enough evidence of an unlawful killing, although he did accuse the 2 men of not telling the truth. Witnesses told conflicting stories of what happened afterwards. Either Kevin passed away and he was buried, or alternatively, he was recovered, went to Newcastle and was never seen again. In 2014, police searched the garden of a pub in Fareham for evidence, but there were no clues, and as of today, there have been no new movements in the investigation. Case 17, April Fabb. April disappeared on the 8th of April 1969 at the age of 13 from Norfolk. At around 1:40 p.m. on the Tuesday, she decided to leave her home to visit her sister's house, which wasn't that far away. She was travelling by bicycle. She had a packet of 10 cigarettes and a handkerchief in her saddlebag, and she was planning to deliver these cigarettes to her brother-in-law as a present. Just after 2 p.m, she was seen cycling along a country road, and at around 2:15, her blue and white bicycle was seen lying in a field by a passing motorist and then survey workers. They called the police station. This was when the police investigation started, and at the time it was one of the biggest the UK had ever seen. They searched 400 houses, conducted hundreds of interviews, and recorded nearly 2,000 statements. There were further searches for April using thermal imaging cameras and the excavation of a well in 2010, but this failed to produce the police any new leads. Jeanette Tate then went missing in August 1978, and the police pointed out the similarities between Jeanette's case and April's. No link has ever really been proven, but Robert Black was questioned over the 2 disappearances and claimed he had no involvement. Unfortunately, there have been no new leads or movement in April's case. Case 18, Sandy Davidson. Sandy was just 3 years old when he went missing from his home in Irvine, Scotland on the 23rd of April 1976. Sandy was playing with his little sister Donna and their dog in the garden of their grandparents' house. The dog ran out of the gate and Sandy chased him, while his sister went inside to inform her grandparents that the dog had escaped. He has not been seen since. Some believe that he followed the dog and fell into a nearby river, whereas his family believe that Sandy was abducted. Offender Angus Sinclair sent a letter to a fellow inmate in 2007 that he expected to be charged with taking the life of Sandy as well as Patricia Black, who also was last seen boarding a bus from the same area in 1976. Sandy was dressed in a purple sweater, long trousers and blue and white sand shoes when he vanished. The search was one of the biggest ever seen in Scotland at the time, involving 10,000 man-hours and 60 policemen. They had cave rescue teams and the Royal Navy Sea King helicopter from the nearby HMS Gannet and a nationwide poster appeal. However, the case took a sinister twist when a workman revealed he saw Sandy getting into a light blue car with a fair-haired man in his 40s. The estate they lived on was also not fully built. There was construction work happening, so there were investigations into whether there was an accident. But with all these leads, there was no new information and they led to nowhere. The case still remains open, but unsolved. Case 19, Allan Bryant. Allan went missing on the 3rd of November 2013 in Fife when he was 23 years old. The 23-year-old was pictured on CCTV leaving the Styx nightclub shortly after 2 a.m. on the 3rd of November. Before heading to this nightclub, he actually went to a friend's engagement party. The nightclub was less than a mile from his house. He got to the club at midnight and left around 2 a.m. Before he left, he briefly spoke to a bouncer and he left through the main entrance before walking up a set of stairs. He then heads in the direction of his home. He was unsteady on his feet. The nightclub CCTV captures his last known sighting, and a number of witnesses reported seeing Allan outside the club. To head home, he would have had to cross the South Parks Road and pass by a Shell garage, but these movements are not picked up on any CCTV in the area. It later emerged that in the first weeks of the investigation, police attempted to collect CCTV from a boxing gym behind the nightclub twice, but failed. The original officers also failed to notice CCTV for the snooker hall, which was attached to the nightclub, but that was on a different system. Both sets of footage were overwritten. There was talks of him maybe attending a party in Barton Place, which was a short distance from the nightclub, although this wasn't confirmed or verified. There were lots of different bits and bobs of information handed to police. One of these was that there was a fight shortly before he left the club, but this wasn't verified. There were screams heard by a woman near Forest Drive, which was around the area that Allan disappeared. His dad said, "This wasn't just normal screaming, but blood-curdling, hysterical screaming. I believe this was in connection with Allan's death, but there have unfortunately been no further leads." Case 20. Tapiwa Matuwi. He went missing on the 7th of February 2019 from Swansea. He was 21 years old. He was last seen on CCTV near Swansea Marina at about 7 a.m. He had been out with friends at Fiction nightclub on the city's Wynn Street. The IT graduate known as Tappy to his friends was spotted at the Castle Gardens, the St David's student accommodation, and finally near the marina on the night that he disappeared, but since then there has been no evidence. There were numerous appeals, but no one contacted the police or the family with any information. He was seen at 4:40 a.m. at a fast food restaurant with friends. After 8 minutes in the restaurant, he was chatting and joking. He is spotted leaving and on his own in a light jog. CCTV then records him returning to his student accommodation, now walking and not jogging. At 5:10 a.m, less than a minute later, he leaves again, walking in the same direction from which he arrived. At 5:30 a.m, he is then seen on CCTV outside of the local supermarket. The supermarket is located near the river which runs through the city of Swansea. He can be seen weaving between pillars as he walks through the supermarket car park. Finally, CCTV captures him arriving on foot at Swansea Yacht Club at 7:06 a.m. in the local marina, and this is the last time he was seen. He was active on his WhatsApp about 2.5 hours before his final sighting. He hasn't used his phone or his bank card since. The police released a CCTV with the hope that someone would come forward, as there's lots of people that the police would like to identify. His father finds it very hard to understand how no one could have seen him on such a busy street, and believes that witnesses may be withholding information. His family are desperate for information and have been tirelessly looking for their son since he disappeared. Unfortunately, there's no movement in his case. Case 21. Elizabeth Chau. Elizabeth went missing in April 1991 from London at the age of 19. Elizabeth was last seen in West London. A police appeal released in 2007 said she left her home in West Ealing at noon to attend the Thames Valley University, which has a campus in that area. She was on a computer studies course. A report in the newspaper in 2006 said she had handed in an assignment before going to the Student Union bar. She was last seen by a friend on the Broadway at 5:50 p.m. that day. There were no leads until Levi Belfield confessed to taking her life. He included details of her kidnapping in a police interview. Detectives have decided that he was lying when he made the confession. Because of this decision, it means that the Met Police will not seek a warrant to dig up the West London site where Belfield claimed to have placed her. Chau's family said they were disappointed by the decision and still believe police should dig up the site. There has been no new leads in her case. 22. Lola Shenkoya. Lola went missing just 9 months after Elizabeth was last seen and on the same road. She went missing on the 3rd of January 2000 at the age of 27. The police think that Lola returned home from Entertainment UK, where she worked as a temp sometimes. She went missing between 4 and 4:30. She was unable to gain entry to her address because her sister, who had the only key, wasn't home yet. Eyewitness accounts suggest that Lola then called the E2 bus from Northfield Avenue. She then travelled to Haven Green, where she got off the bus outside the Burger King, which is near to the Broadway Underground station, and Lola has not been seen since. Andrzej Konoski was a suspect in the case. The police asked for information relating to him. He had committed various crimes in Poland and moved to England and took the life of Katrina Kohn. There have been no further leads in Lola's case. And that case concludes our video today. If you have any information on any of these cases we've covered, the contact details are in the description. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time.